Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. On today's podcast, I chat with Gale West, author of Money, Come Dance With Me, about living in delight. Hey everyone. So, the first thing I want to tell you is that after I stopped recording, Gale and I kept chatting. And I wish I would have kept recording because one of the things that she told me was she met Dick back in the day. And in 1995, I think that was the year that she said, that the first IFS training was actually held in her apartment. And so I just thought that was so funny. Like, can you imagine like Dick trying to get these trainings together or a training or a conversation, and then the first training being in Gale's apartment. So it was just a funny story. And I was so disappointed that I had stopped recording. But what's also kind of funny is I record these on Zoom, and so I tell everyone as soon as I meet you, I record the whole thing. So even if we might chat about like what's going on and questions and stuff like that, and then I just edit all that out. And so and often the guest doesn't remember that we're recording, and so as soon as I said, like, I don't think Gail and I even said hello. She had just opened up her book. And so, probably 10 or 15 minutes after we start talking, she says, "Wait, are you recording?" And I was like, "Yes." And I was so thankful that I had because she said so much rich, amazing stuff. I did edit out when she said, "Hey, are you recording?" So I just thought it was so funny. And then I was like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed that I actually had stopped recording at the end," because she talked about meeting Dick and having the first training in her apartment and all that stuff. And so I wanted to tell you guys that. So she is an IFS practitioner, and obviously she's been around the IFS community a whole lot. I actually met Gale in person at one of the annual conferences. She talks about speaking at one of the conferences, and that's not the one that I went to, but so I met her and her partner in person, and they were just lovely, lovely people. I got an email that Gale had written a book, and I thought, oh gosh, I really like Gale, and it was called Money, Come Dance With Me. And I thought, oh, I don't want to read that. I don't want to read anything with money. Ooh, yuck, 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 yuck. But I really liked Gale, and I thought, hey, I'll check it out. And I was surprised and amazed how spiritual that book was. And I think that's the reason why I decided to call this episode Living in Delight, because um, we talk about the self of money, the self of business, the burden of money, ancestors and money. And then we talk about her strokes and the joy in finding higher meaning in jobs. We talk about the body. We talk about being aware of your transceiver. And it's a packed full conversation, but the thread that's between everything is the idea of delight. And one of the things that Gale says, her motto for 2020, we recorded this actually, I couldn't remember if it was at the end of 2020 or I think it was actually between like Christmas and New Year's. And because I did the Heirloom Summit, I ended up recording a whole lot of podcasts in a short period of time. And so things are sort of just trickling out now. But one of the things that she said that I absolutely loved was, may you flourish in all ways and may delight guide your days. And I loved that. And I thought after I got off the call with her, I just was like, delight was the theme. And that's what I wanted to name the podcast Living in Delight. You can connect with Gale on her website, successwithsoul.com, and definitely buy her book. I would highly recommend. And definitely notice parts of you that up around money, like, oh gosh. But her book is called Money, Come Dance With Me, and I highly recommend it. And as we talk about, the cover is gorgeous. So definitely go check out the cover. And please share this episode with a friend who could use a little bit of delight in their life. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, all the things. And of course, as always, I would love to hear from you at IFS Tammy on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse, or on the One Inside Podcast Facebook page. Enjoy.
I just got a copy of my book like a few minutes ago. I did not have a copy of my book until recent. Just like I walked in the door and there it is. Is it beautiful?
It's beautiful. I love it. How are you feeling looking at that cover?
Um, I can't believe that. And I'm reading it going, wow, this is really good. So you don't know how it's going to be received until people have
Yeah.
been going, it's great. And my friend sent 4 copies to her friends, but I didn't have a copy. I didn't have my own copy because the publisher ordered 20 copies for me, but they weren't going to be coming until the middle of January.
Oh, wow.
So I said, for Christmas, can you order me a copy of my book?
That's so weird. You would think they would have given you like advanced copies or something.
Well, it's print on demand. So,
Oh, okay.
and they didn't, so they were really pushing the Kindle version to get bestseller in a bunch of categories. So I was bestseller, international bestseller in Mexico in personal budgeting.
Oh
I
my
do not
gosh.
mention budgeting at all in the book. Isn't that funny?
That is funny. And you're like, how does that work? Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
that's so
know. I don't
funny.
know. So then from there, because so they could put bestseller on
Oh,
the
the
outside,
cover.
on the
Yep.
cover.
I
So
love
that,
the image of it. The image of the parts dancing. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's a blue and a green and a red, and
yeah,
it's they're dancing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, originally they sent me pictures of graphics of people dancing and throwing up money, and I'm like, no, 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 no. This it's not about that. And so I went online and I look at uh, vectors of people dancing, vectors of dancing. This is similar to one I found, and they created that. And just it just is. It's got a lovely feel to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it
It's
does.
happy.
Yeah, it looks like a heart. And actually the three people look like they're sort of forming a heart, and the wording is in sort of a pretty italics sort of. Yeah, it's a beautiful title. It's colorful, and yeah. Because I think what happens for me, just sort of jumping in, is that when I think about reading a book about money, I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want to. I think that's a
Yeah.
part.
Well, I totally understand. Well, it's interesting because the very first title was Money, a Healing Journey. And I talk
Mm.
about that in the last chapter because that's dancing with joy and delight. And I say that it's not a joyful title. And I
Yeah.
don't know where Money Come Dance With Me came from. People go, well, how'd you get the title? I don't remember. It just kind of came to me.
Wow, I love
And
that.
and every time I'd say, well, what's the title? The people would say, what's the title of your book? I said, Money Come Dance With Me. And they go, oh, that's a beautiful title. It's so happy. And I'm like, yeah, it should be happy.
Mm.
It's
Well,
about joy.
money isn't often happy, right? It doesn't. I think about money, I feel the like budget gives me like I have a tense,
Panic.
yes. Ah, yes.
Oh, totally, totally. Yeah. And this is about having a joyful relationship to money. It's interesting. I had talked to Dick about um, I did it a summit like a couple of years ago, and Dick was on my summit, and I was asking him, "Do you believe that money has a self?" Because that's my thing. That money is a consciousness; it's more than energy, and that you can have a relationship with it. That's one of joy and delight. And
Wow.
um, and he said, because I don't know if he's actually published this paper, but he wrote a paper about how countries have a self,
Hmm.
and that he said, yeah, I do believe that money has a self, And not this past year because we couldn't do so last year at the conference, I did a piece called Does Money Have a Self?
Wow.
That I presented at the conference. And it was really cool because what I had people do is put all the parts of them, like their ancestral parts, their own parts are related to money. And then I was talking about how money has been burdened, that it holds all these burdens in the shadow of the human race, and that we projected all our pain, trauma, and sorrow on money. And so people stepped over into the self of money and named all the burdens that money had and put them behind. And then they actually had a dialogue from self to self. It was
Wow.
so profound. People had amazing shifts.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing to think about like money. So as soon as you said that, I thought, yeah, like if I had a conversation with the self of money, I could imagine that money is saying like it has a good intention for me. Like it has a good intention. It's not trying to trap me or make me feel worthless or bad or too good or wow. Yeah, I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, and it isn't it amazing when you look at it from that perspective. And that's the shift that so many people have. They go, whoa, I never thought of that from that perspective. It's like something, my intention in writing the book was that it had such a high frequency of love that people just having the book in their hand would shift them. And when they read it, it would create a shift in their consciousness.
Wow. Wow. I love that. Well, and the cover does that a little bit. Like the cover draws you in. Like even if the subject sort of like, oh gosh, money, but the cover is so inviting and so like, oh, okay, I want to read this. And dancing is inviting.
Right, right. Yeah.
Tell me about this idea of money having a consciousness, because that's one of your dancing with conscious co-creation. Is that sort of the same idea?
Yeah. It comes with beginning to talk to money as a consciousness. So a number of years ago, I was living in China, and I got back, and I was like, "What am I going to do with my life?" I am trained to do something called the Akashic Records, and it's kind of Akashic means it's a Sanskrit word and means all of creation. So in a sense, all of creation is in this history called Akashic Records, and you can access it. I access it through a prayer. So when I got back from China, I was thinking, I think I want to go back to China and help them access their wisdom and their connection to the divine, because it was stripped from them during the Cultural Revolution. So I reached out to my teacher and I said, I want to get certified. And so in my certification, I was talking to my mentor, and we had to open the records every day and get information for us and whatever. And I said, I keep hearing work in the consciousness of businesses, and I don't know what to do. And she said, oh, well, then do that. I said, do businesses have a consciousness? She said, everything has a consciousness.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, well, that's wild. So I reached out to colleagues of mine and I said, can I open the records of your business and you and your soul and see how they integrate and how they're aligned? So I used to say in my networking events, I align the soul of your business with the business of your soul. That was one of my taglines. And I got really specific information. Businesses would say, I'm really frustrated, I want to grow. And I began to realize that the issue for a lot of people was a relationship to money and advancement and their sense of self. So I thought, and at that point, I was struggling with money myself. It was like 2009. And, that a lot of trauma was going on in the field. And I thought, I wonder if money has a consciousness. So the very first thing I said, money, how do you grow? And I got this very specific information about investments and about helping people grow. And then there was started to talk about how Costa Rica is not a country of fear. And as a result, it's expansive. They export their beauty, and that America is consistently more and more a country of have and have-nots. And I thought, whoa, this was amazing. So I started getting up every day and talking to money
Wow.
and getting very specific information about me, about how money kept saying, open your receiving channels, open your receiving channels, which
Wow.
were really stuck. And I really realized how stuck they were. And then one day, uh, I heard the predominant matrix of humanity is domination and greed. And I have been aligned with that. The new matrix of humanity is collaboration and generosity. I want to be aligned with that. Can you please help me? And I started crying. And even when I say that, I, it still brings tears to my eyes. And that in that moment, I realized that money is holding the shadow of the human race.
Wow.
It's been misaligned, and that if it could be its pure potential, it would be the expression of divine love in the marketplace.
Wow.
Because when we bring ourselves to the marketplace, we bring our wisdom, we bring our gifts, we are divine. We are
Hmm.
divine beings. And
Hmm.
so that allows money. And I believe that when we truly walk our destiny path, it's the greatest act of love, self love, and making love to the world. So that allows money then to be translated. So that love that we bring becomes money.
I love it. So would you say that, like in IFS language, would you say that money has had burdens or sort of there's
Yes,
okay.
money is very burdened. I have this story in the book where I talk about how many years ago I was camping and I borrowed my friend's flashlight and I went to the outhouse and I'm going to the bathroom and I reached for the flashlight and it fell down into the hole, and of course it was illuminating all this
Oh my
stuff.
gosh.
And then I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so the next day I go back and there it is, way down there, illuminating the rest of the stuff that people had left.
Oh.
And that money is the same way. That it's still shining, but it's been burdened
Oh.
by greed and avarice and trauma, and so much of what we struggle with in our stories. So many of our stories, if they include money, we project that energy onto money. It's not about money, it's about the relationship we have with other people.
Okay, so explain that. The relationship we have with other people.
So a friend of mine called me up and she goes, oh, I'm reading the chapter on forgiveness. And I really have to deal with my lawsuit. And what happened was she hired this architect to rebuild their house. And it was really shambles. And they had to sue him because the materials he used were really what they weren't what they were supposed to be. And she said, I need to forgive. This is not about money, and I've made it about money. It's about forgiving.
What about, so when I think about burdens around money, I think about like family, like legacy burdens around people, sort of that idea of, my grandparents or my parents grew up in the Depression or I grew up in poverty. And so I have these burdens around how I handle money because of my, like the generations and the ancestors around money.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest burdens. One of the things I say in my workshops is most of the relationship you have with money has nothing to do with you. it's pretty much the grandparents.
Okay.
And there's a lot of trauma that gets, so I talk about the stories that we have, the stories of money, the stories of the collective. So you're talking about the depression. That's the story of the collective, and the energy of the depression is actually in the field. And a lot of us if our families really suffered in the depression, that's still in the field, just energetically, but in our own field.
Mm.
And so when people look at the burdens that they hold, and so when we did that workshop where I had people identify the burdens, many of them were family.
Yeah.
And then there's the energy of the stories of childhood and the stories of when we were an adult. So in childhood, so much of what we pick up as a child is kind of the energy that's in the home. So if there's a lot of fear in the home, there's a lot of trauma in the home, there's fighting around money, we're going to pick that up.
Because that's in our field.
That's in our field.
Okay. Okay.
I have a story of one of my clients who's, when she would ask her father for money for lunch money, he would go over to the table and he'd kind of like look at his change and he'd go, "Do you think money grows on trees? Do you think money grows on trees?" And he'd throw the money at her. And then another woman who was saving all her pennies and nickels and dimes showed it to her dad, and he took it. One of the biggest burdens she had was not being able to save. That
Wow.
really translated in, why should I save? Because like this was taken from me.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So when I really believe that you got to first work with the burdens of your ancestors, because you so many people struggle with burdens that aren't theirs. And so when you work with the burdens of the ancestors and you really say, well, now what's mine? Then you can kind of come with a clean slate of what your burdens are.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that how you do that? Like when you work with when say someone comes to you to work with you individually, or you're doing a workshop, and like how would you lead someone to work with their ancestral burdens?
Oh, so I love this. In my workshops, I do this amazing process where I have people lie down and we actually physically draw their whole body. And then I lead them in a shamanic journey to draw the burdens of their ancestors that they're carrying. And it's whether they can, so when they get up, they go, whoa, this is on my head. This is over here. This is over there. So they have a physical, they can see it very real. And there's something that's even physical that they can access with those burdens and begin to see how much their trauma that they're actually holding.
Hmm. Right. So they might not even know. So it's not something that they might even be conscious of or aware of. Okay.
Yeah, so they'll go, oh, I felt something over on my head and something over on my hips, and I felt something in my heart. So they don't necessarily need to know what it is, but just to have a physicality and they can see it is so profound.
Well, and then you're obvious. Then you're intentionally then having them draw it on their body. So you're like you are carrying this in your body.
Yes, yes, yes. And then we do another journey, shamanic journey, where we call in the ancestors. And we ask for the gifts of that. And we actually unburden the ancestors. I truly believe that this time that we are living in is a time of healing for the collective, for the whole world. And it's interesting because this book should have been out in May, but I had a stroke. And I was like, why? What happened? Da, 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 da. But it actually came out right after the election. And there was a huge opening in the field that happened. And it feels like I was thinking about what I wanted to say for 2021, and it's may you flourish in all ways, and may delight guide your days. And I think that that's the energy that's coming into 2021.
Do you want to talk about your stroke at all? Because you've had a couple now.
Yeah, I can talk about it. So I had a stroke in May, and it was a very acute stroke. But fortunately, my partner found me pretty quickly after I had the stroke, so they were able to give me an enzyme that dissolved the clot. I had a 2 centimeter clot in my brain, and I'm like, excuse me. It's so funny because my family said, you had a stroke, because I've always been really healthy, worked out, at least an hour a day. I eat really good food, and I had a stroke. So, but it was my heart. I had AFib and I didn't know it, and that's what caused the stroke. So, but interestingly enough, so it was the left side of my brain, which is about structure. And I still now have a issue with time. That the left side of our brain is around time and about, all those kinds of things, well, making things happen. But the right side of the brain is where delight lives. So in the beginning, I was always in this feeling that was just amazing. And it dawned on me one day that it was delight. Everything delighted me. I would go down to the little pond down by the lake, and I would just look at the ducks. I did that every day, and it was just like amazingly amount of delight. And so, and there was another thing about that I had a sense of being in the other realm of dying and what that was about, and also the inevitability of my future. And that there was nothing to worry about, that all would be well. No matter what, my goals would wait for me, my life would wait for me, and that my only job was to be in delight. And for someone who has been a closet type A for many years, that was absolutely profound.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I just feel really I mean, I never thought of myself as a type A, but the more stuff I'm doing, the more I'm like, geez, I've got a lot going on. It's too much. And so just the idea of having that soften, that left brain, or those parts of us, those manager parts that drive us and go, go, go. And yeah, to have that settle down.
Well, the interesting thing also, Tammy, was that the parts of me that I've struggled with all my life, self-doubt, self-esteem issues, all those things that were somewhat crippling in many ways, were offline. I couldn't access them.
Wow.
They're like gone.
Why do you think that might be? Hmm.
I think they lived in the left brain. That's where they live.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fascinating, and I really want to do some research around that, because a 2 centimeter clot is a huge clot. And I saw the MRI, and it's like a big hole. And
Wow.
so basically, some of the parts, how to say this? So when that happens, it actually destroys part of your brain. And things start coming back online, like being able to move my body and being able to have strength in my, so it was my right side that was affected. So I'm basically creating new neural pathways. So so I wrote about this in a blog that we're going through the same thing right now with the pandemic, that we're all in this in between state. I
Mm,
kept kind of trying to go back to what was normal, and it wasn't working
right.
because normal didn't exist. But the new hadn't been created. And
Yeah.
so, in the same way, because we're going through this pandemic, which is really sustained. If it would have been 2 weeks or a month, no, it wouldn't have been much change. But it's a sustained energy that we can't we can't grasp. We keep trying to go back to normal, and normal doesn't exist. So
Mm.
we are literally each collectively creating new neural pathways.
Wow.
We're all in this in between state.
Well, and it sounds like, not to sound too Pollyanna about it, but we get to establish, like, sort of, we get to establish new. If we recognize that, and we are open to that, it's an opportunity to establish new pathways.
Yep, yep. And that doesn't mean that now it's been 7 months and 7 months that I don't go into the, you know, kind of stress patterns, but I can pretty quickly remember delight and zip back there. And so the more we create that energy that we can really tap into, that is available to all of us. And the other thing that I want to share is this idea of so many of us are told to listen to your heart. Listen to your heart. Well, most people's hearts aren't chatting. I mean, they might be chatting, but we're not listening to them because the
No.
volume goes down. And the more
Right.
you don't listen, the more the volume goes down.
Yeah,
And
right.
so that's been a really interesting thing for me, was that because my heart started really going into AFib a lot. So I was pretty much towards the end in AFib about 70% of the time. That means my heart is really beating um, in a very unrhythmic pattern. And that's why I had the procedure a couple of weeks ago to fix it. Um,
Okay.
and then it kind of came back, and I went into this, well, I can't believe it. Da, 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 da. I was really upset. But my heart was saying, you're not done with me yet.
Wow.
You got to listen to me.
Mm.
Listen to me and listen to what brings you joy. And when I don't spend my days in ways that are joyful, I can really feel my heart going, no, that's not what we're going to do now.
Wow.
Remember? And I just, so last week it was 165 beats a minute. I talked to my doctor. I can't believe it. I not only had a stroke, but I had this procedure that now isn't working. He's going, calm down. It takes 3 months to really know it's going to work. And then I'm like tuning in, going, oh, my heart wanted to make sure that I remembered.
Wow.
It's about joy, it's about delight.
Mm.
And I talk about that in my book. I didn't grow up knowing that it was okay to do something just because it brought me joy.
Mm.
Because in my family, which was kind of bleak, if you did things just for because it brought you joy, you were supposed to be working. You were supposed to be doing something. So I say that I've realized that the belief I had was, if I do something just because it brings me joy, I'll be punished.
Wow. Mm.
And then the other belief was the only way to make money is doing things you don't want to do. So they work really well together.
Yes, I was just thinking that because there's also this idea of, right, if I'm doing something that brings me delight, well, is it making me money? Like, or is it making money for my family, or is it helping out, is it helping out my family? If it's not, then it doesn't matter that it's giving me delight. Sort of that money is wrapped up into that.
Yeah, yeah, totally is wrapped up into that. And the more that people connect with money, they begin to realize that um, this is about joy. That many of us have. Well, if it's just if you, as long as you're making money, it's okay. You don't you don't have to be happy.
Yeah, that's awful.
It kind of is.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But how many people live that way? I mean, I think that's right. I think about like my parents' generation. I think you just had a job. You weren't happiness wasn't part of it. You just sort of you did what wherever you could find a job or whatever your grandparents were did. That's what they did, and um, yeah. I also think of probably sort of like maybe not just generation, but sort of classism. Sort of like if you're more like blue collar, then that you're not finding joy in your job. You're just doing a trade, and I don't know, making a assumption, but I'm just thinking about my own family, and that's just the message of like you just go to work, get up, go to work, do your job, and your joy comes on the weekends, maybe on Friday nights.
Yeah, but if you really look at how do I, so I had a client of mine that was her job had kind of changed, and she was really bummed out because she didn't feel like she was bored to tears, and she couldn't figure out like how she could make it better for herself. I said, well, wait a minute. Your essence is joy, which I really felt it was. And what if when you came into work, you had a commitment to make your environment as joyful as possible?
Mm.
So it wasn't about the work you did, but how you showed up in your environment.
Wow.
Because we don't realize that if we're that, with mirror neurons, if we come into an environment in a place that's joyful, it's going to make everybody else joyful. And
Yeah.
it's going to really shift that environment. So if you can look at what is the higher meaning of my presence on this planet or my presence in this cubicle, then the work that we do begins to have meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
There's
that.
a study done with housekeepers in hospitals. Now that's probably one of the lowest jobs at one. You're not very high in the totem pole on the hospital, but many of them are actually pretty happy at what they do because they find meaning in their experience.
Wow.
They're coming into a room and they're greeting the person that's there, and they're bringing cleanliness to the person who's sick.
Mm. Mm. Well, it
So
sounds like that's what's happening with you and your stroke is that you found this beautiful, deeper meaning for yourself.
yeah, it's interesting because the stuff I didn't really care about um, putting my website together and doing all those kinds of things that felt like really heavy. And now, oh, I get to put my website together. This is so much fun. And I get to make it really beautiful. And so there's a whole
Wow.
different way that I'm approaching the things that before were really heavy. So when I look at something, I say, well, how do I make it delightful? How do I bring joy to the things that I'm wanting to do? And so
Wow.
that brings a whole different set of meaning to the work that we have.
Do you think that part of that joy and that delight is because you aren't having like when you look at like your website and the stuff that's really heavy and the stuff that's like, oh, stuff I have to do. Do you think that it's because those self-doubting parts aren't there? Do you think that has something to do with it?
Um, no,
Okay.
that's a good question, but I don't. It's about. Oh, I really took time off from working, and I started painting again. well, I was painting before, but really giving time to my artist. And that's one of the things that when I don't do something every day that's creative, my heart starts going, remember me. Like, and it reminds me, and I can feel it. I can feel my heart going, we're going for joy.
Wow.
You got to do things that bring you joy.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk more about this idea of, who's talking to us. Usually it's our brain or our like my head's telling me this, my head's telling me that. Tell me about this idea of my heart gets out of rhythm and that's almost a way of it saying it's like knocking on you, like, hey, I need some attention. I need you to listen to me. So tell me about that, because not usually how we think about our bodies or pain or yeah, tell me about that.
Well, this is the biggest aha that I got. And actually, it's interesting because at the last conference, there was a woman that got up and started talking about, she's a physical therapist or something like that. She started talking about how she teaches people to talk to the parts of their body. And my takeaway was that my body is separate from me.
Yeah.
It has its own energy and it has its own intelligence. And that the more that I honor it and I speak to it and I give it voice and I love it, it actually, I feel the love for myself. And it's because that wasn't another thing from my childhood. If you were sick, you were accused of wanting to get out of work. So this was like not in something where I knew that it was okay to take care of your body. I need to move, so that's why I exercise. But it wasn't about, oh, I love my body. It was, I gotta go, I gotta move, I gotta move. And that that was the most profound piece, is feeling into the energy, the soul of my body. And the rabbi, we study with a Kabbalistic rabbi, and he talks about how each organ has a soul. And you can talk to your body. You can talk to the soul of your liver if it's sick. Talk to it. And even each cell of your body has a soul. So I talk to my body every day. I talk to my brain. I talk to my nervous system. I say, oh, you're the information highway. I love you. You heal me, bring it. And then talk to my heart. Thank you so much for beating. And so the more that I attend to my body with absolute love and caring, the more that I feel a sense of love for myself. Because that sense that my body is housing my soul, it is the most amazing gift that we can have. And that was the other takeaway that I got from the stroke and that kind of visitation in the other side, was what a gift it is to be in a body. We have no idea of what a gift it is. I want to talk about desire. So there's two pieces here. And I actually want to read this. It's about dancing with conscious co-creation. So this was my early communication with money. It said, you must become aware of your transceiver. All of creation is constantly sending and receiving. But most humans are not conscious that they create their lives in each moment by what they are sending and what they are able to receive.
Wow.
You must become aware of what you are sending and receiving. This is the key to true power. So I've read that over and over again, and it's so profound. Number one, I didn't even know transceiver was a word until like 2 years later. I met this who is now my partner. And I was telling him about that. And he goes, oh, it's a word. It is? I thought money had made up some word. I got this new download of a word from the universe or something. It's a ham radio word. And it's a ham radio that's able to send signals and to receive signals.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that fascinating?
That is
But the
fascinating.
key here is that being able to,
Mm,
in what you're sending and what you are able to receive.
yeah.
Most people have a really difficult time with receiving. And that's the key to prosperity, wealth, delight, joy, all these kinds of, for a prosperous life is about being able to receive.
Mm,
And the other thing is sending what you desire.
yeah.
And if your signals, so a lot of us have parts that think they want something, but that's not really what they want. And so they get it, and it doesn't really satisfy. And so you want more, and you want more. A lot of that's about spending, um, about acquiring, which is really kind of killing the planet in many ways. And but if we really understood sending and receiving from a really powerful way. So I want to go back to this idea you were talking about desire. I was creating a workshop on manifesting with ease and grace. I do all these things because I want to learn how. I want to create a protocol for myself. So I say, okay, I'll put in something to do this workshop at a conference and then see how it goes. And then I was realizing to create something, to make something happen in the world, you need to have desire. You need to have belief that it can happen, and you need to be able to expect that, oh, this is possible for me.
Mm,
I can make this happen. So you have to, there's a sense of expectancy that this is, I'm able to bring this into being. So I started thinking about, and this is like, how aligned am I with desire? I do dowsing. So I connected into how aligned am I with desire. It was about 90%. And then I thought, well, I wonder if heart's desire is different than desire. So I checked. It was 12%. Like, 12%. Wow, this is cause for pause.
wow. Wow.
Yeah. And I realized that desire is the conscious mind, what I
Okay.
thought I wanted.
Yeah.
Heart's desire is what I really want. And then there's another one that I realized later on, and that's soul desire.
Mm,
So a lot of the people that I work with are very spiritually oriented. That's how I self-select, and many of them are connected to soul desire. I am on my path. I'm doing what my soul came to do. Blah blah blah. But they're not so connected to heart's desire. And this goes back to what we were talking about making money in a way that brings you joy.
mm,
And so heart and soul desire need to be aligned
mm. Wow.
because we're here to be of service to the world, but we're here to do that in a way that brings joy and delight.
Mm, mm,
I think that's the gift of the divine. And the other thing is really understanding that this is the garden of earthly delights. And earthly delights is I have a body. I think that's how they trick us into coming. I can taste, I can see beauty, I can hear music, I can create, all of these things are a gift of the divine. I had a vision one time. I was doing some guided imagery music, and I was standing on the top of a hill, looking out what seemed like Italy, because it was a little village, and it felt like it was the Mediterranean, and there was this large being next to me, and the being moved his arm and kind of like showing me this beautiful scene and says, look, this is the garden of earthly delights. This is the ingenuity of the humans. Why do people not know that this is a gift from the divine? To really, truly allow yourself to enjoy life.
That's beautiful. So we only have a few more minutes. And what's coming up for me is I'd love for you to talk more about this idea of sending and receiving. And I think this specifically, like where the parts of me want to shop because that will give me something, but it's not what I actually need or want. Can you talk about that?
I have a whole chapter on conscious spending.
Well, something just struck me when you said that because I thought my body, like I'll do something like say overspend on Amazon to fulfill a need or a desire, but it's actually not. It fulfills a little bit of a desire, like that's super great, and like retail therapy, but it's not really like right. It's fulfilling maybe my head desire, but it's certainly not fulfilling my heart's desire or my soul's desire.
Well, the thing is, when you really connect to what I call divine desire, desire is divine. We wouldn't be able to make anything happen in our lives if we didn't have desire. So we really need desire. But to begin to understand that when you tap down into that desire that is divine, it's really understanding what quality do I want? What is the quality that I'm trying to bring into my life? So let's say you're shopping and you're really wanting to bring joy, but you're not feeling happy. But it doesn't really fulfill you because the stuff comes, you know, why would I buy that? So, but like really understanding what is the quality so that when you really understand it, it begins to bring, like, how can I bring that into my life right now? If I'm looking for joy, what right now in this moment is going to bring me joy?
Love it. Yeah. Yeah. And then we go back to the sending and receiving and the mirror neurons, right? If I want joy, how do I send it, which will help me receive it? It's
Well,
beautiful.
because the more that you really bring in that energy of what you really want, the more it draws that of more of that to you, and the more you begin to create what you really want.
That's
You
great.
don't have, so people can have a joyously wealthy life before they have a lot of money in the bank. Because I talk about that there are 7 dimensions to wealth. And interestingly enough, the word wealth actually comes from it's an old English word, wheel. It means well-being. It is not what we think of as lots of money in the bank.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, in well-being, I think about, right, joy and desire, having a life of joy and a life of things that you desire. Not
Yes.
things, but like the feelings you desire and
Well, the other thing is I talk about in the chapter on conscious spending, what are your values? When you're really clear, like one of my values is beauty.
mm,
I have fresh flowers every week because that's really, so even when I didn't have a lot of money, I'd buy one flower and put it in a vase.
yeah.
So there are ways that when you begin to know what brings you adventure. So when
Mm,
I was in China, I would get on a bus and just go wherever because that was my grand adventure. And then I'd get off the bus and then walk around. And if I couldn't find my way home, I'd get on a taxi. So, and that was like one RMB. I mean, it's like 10 cents. So when
Wow.
you really understand the essence of who you are and what brings you joy, you can create a joyfully wealthy life before you have lots of money in the bank, by beginning to understand. And then the more you draw that in, the more you open your receiving channels, the more that you open your sending and receiving channels, and it works.
And we didn't do our beginning and our ending. So normally I would begin you with, we would start off with sort of where you are in the world and what you see when you look out a nearest window. So I don't know if you want to tell everybody where you are in the world.
I am in Evanston, Illinois, and when I look out the window right now, it is, we just got a beautiful snow, and everything is blanketed with this white, and it's really lovely. We have, I think it's pretty much our first snow, and that's where I am.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the last question is, if you weren't doing what you're doing, what would you do instead?
Oh, I thought about that after you sent me the. I would continue to paint, and I would probably move back to China and maybe teach at the university again, and find my Chinese brush painting teacher and begin to really study Chinese brush painting.
Is there any way you want the listeners to contact you, or for just to find out more about your book or more about you?
Well, the book, Money Come Dance With Me, you can find on Amazon. It's both in paperback and in Kindle. My website is Success with Soul, because I'm really passionate about changing the paradigm of success and money to one that's more collaborative and generous, where all thrive. And you can email me at Gale@successwithsoul.com.
Perfect. Anything else you want to say?
I want to just invite people to really honor their bodies, their lives, and their wisdom, and that each person is a gift to the world and a gift to the divine, and that you are loved more deeply and dearly than you could ever know. So gift yourself with that.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy, and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client, so that you can have a nice looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside.